Shabbat intentionally, so then we have any, if he was not warned, then we say this karet. Karet is that the person will die 60. And if there was a warning and it was done intentionally, so it's stated that there is a punishment, is a death penalty of skila. So let's take a look at the two dots at the top of the page of 6b3. Amama. We said either if a person carries from private property to public property, or from public property to private property, Vishogeg, if he does it unintentionally, chayiv chatat. He has to bring a sin offering for not knowing the law, for not knowing, for forgetting it was Shabbat. He has to bring a sin offering. But if he doesn't maze it, the Gemara says intentionally, and knows karet, there's a punishment of karet if he has no warning, with niskal, and there's skila. There's the death penalty if he's was warned. So now the Gemara wants to understand what is the necessity of this Braita to tell us this law. The idea that the Shogeg, unintentionally he's chayav chatat, he's obligated a sin offering. We know that already. The Shogeg chayav chatat pshita. It's obvious that if he violates the Shabbat unintentionally, he has to bring a korban chatat, sin offering, as Rashi states. Once you told me that this area, you identified the private property, you identified public property, what's called private, what's called public. So it should have just said, if you went ahead and you carry, or you carry from private to public to private, chayav. Just tell me chayav, he's obligated, and we know already the law that if a person violates the Shabbat unintentionally, he brings a sin offering. Because the general rule is, if a sin that if it were done intentionally would carry with it the karet penalty, the cut off penalty, the Rambam says cut off for the next world as well. If he's cut off, if there's karet for the sin, so the rule is then if there's a chatat, there's a sin offering for the unintentional violation of a violation that carries with it at least karet if it would be done intentionally. For instance, the classic case is chelev, the certain fat on an animal, certain fats that you're allowed to eat, the certain fats that you're not allowed to eat. And the fats that you're not allowed to eat carries with it, if a person does it intentionally, the karet penalty, the penalty of being cut off. And if a person violates that unintentionally, he has to bring a korban chatat, a sin offering. So that's old news. So why do you need to tell me that there's an obligation of a korban chatat, a sin offering? Just tell me if you violate the Shabbat, if you violate the Shabbat unintentionally, chayav. Just say the word chayav. You don't need to tell me tell me specifically. You don't have to spell it out. Chayav chatat, a sin offering. That's the Gemara's question. The Gemara says, you're right. We really don't need to spell it out. But the reason why we spelled it out is because of the other law. The Gemara says, "B'mezid enesh karei v'niskal istuchalei." Because since we need to say that if you did it intentionally, there is karet, there is the punishment of karet if he does it intentionally. And if he was warned, he'll actually get that death penalty. Because we needed to state that law, that if the violation of the Shabbat, carrying a Shabbat from private to private, there'll be this karet of mitah, the karet of the death penalty. So therefore, once we needed to say that, we were uniformed, and we also spoke about the unintentional, the consequence, the punishment for unintentional violation of Shabbat. There is such a rule. We welcome Asaf. There's a rule that sometimes that once you need to say something about something else, so you like to be uniform, and you'll say about this, even though you might not need to say about this. That's what the Gemara wants to suggest. The Gemara wants to suggest at this point that once we need to be specific about what is the actual punishment for the violation of Shabbat intentionally, so therefore we're happy to also state the punishment for the violation of Shabbat that's unintentional. We don't necessarily have to tell you that because we already know the unintentional punishment. So the Gemara shoots back, but who needs to? What do you need to tell me about the punishment for the intentional violation of Shabbat? That we already know as well. The Gemara Shahanami Pshita, we know that's obvious. So Rashi says, what's the Rashi interesting note? The Gemara's question is Pshita, is that we find in the Torah there's a man who desecrated the Shabbat, the Mekoshesh Eitzim, and he violated the Shabbat. And it said they asked Moshe what to do, and Hashem told Moshe he gets a death penalty. So we already see openly from the Torah that the violation of the Shabbat, if someone is warned, he gets skila, he's stoned to death. So we have that as an open pasuk in the Torah that we know, and we don't need you to tell me this law that the intentional violation of the Shabbat comes with it the death penalty. So you can't tell me that the reason why you're telling me the punishment for the unintentional violation of the Shabbat, because you needed to tell me what the punishment is for intentional violation of the Shabbat. The intentional violation of the Shabbat, you don't need to tell me. That's the Gemara's question. So the Gemara answers, Hakamash Malan, what is it coming to tell us? The following. Kidarav. Damarav. Masati Megillah Starim Be'Rav Chia. I found in a certain Megillah, certain scroll, that's called Megillat Sidorim. You know, everyone knows there's something called a Matan B'Seiter. What's Matan B'Seiter? Matan B'Seiter is when you give secretly, you give charity anonymously. People don't know who was the man who gave that charity. You know, and there is an idea, there is a level of charity that when the person doesn't know who gave it, so the receiver is not embarrassed. Let's say you have someone in the synagogue, someone in the community that lost their job, or financially they're really hit bad, and you give them money. So if you give them money directly so then there's an embarrassment. But if you go, let's say somehow, you know, the Gemara talks about the rabbi who would, you know.
Morning, William.
What'd you say? Put the money under the door, right? He would drop off the money. He didn't want anybody ever to see him. He didn't want the person to see him that he was giving the charity. So here, the Megillah Sidorim, the Gemara says in Gittin, you're not supposed to write oral law. What we're studying from right now, the Gemara, that we're studying the Gemara inside. It's a printed book, it's a printed sefer. Really, originally, we were not allowed to do that. Not allowed to study written law, written law, you study from the Chumash, is written law, more than 8th. So that's supposed to be studied from a scroll. But a oral law was originally not given to be written down. However, when the rabbis would hear certain words of a certain chidush, certain novel of a Torah scholar, you'd say you heard something that was not commonly known in the Beit Midrash, they would write it down and they would hide it. They didn't want to write, they didn't publicize it. It wasn't given out for people to learn to read from, but it was allowed. There was an allowance to write it down in order that it shouldn't be forgotten. That was an allowance. And the question is, why wasn't this writing down of this scroll, why wasn't this in violation of the prohibition to write down oral Torah? So some say because since it was not made for public use, it was made for private use, that Torah should not be forgotten. So therefore, that's not called a problem. And the other idea was, some say it's only if you're going to teach Torah, oral Torah from a written script. But if you're not using this written book, you're not using a text to teach the oral Torah. Rather, you're just using the text just to remember certain things. I'm using the text to remember these laws, not to forget. But I'm not taking. I mean, the rabbi did not take out this text to use this text to teach from. That was not part of the original prohibition. Now, so again, the first opinion says that writing, it's not forbidden to write down the Torah of an individual opinion when there's a concern that it's going to be forgotten. Now, I also saw someone wrote an idea is that if you wrote, let's say there was an opinion of someone that's not the halacha, and sometimes they would write down that opinion, so if people later on would say that this opinion, they would know that this opinion is not the halacha. But as time went on, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi said, Rabbi Yehuda Hanassi says that he based on a pasuk in Tehillim, "Eit la'asod laHashem b'feirat Toratecha," that sometimes there might be a time period that there was a concern that Torah would be forgotten from the Jewish people. And therefore, as a result of that, because Torah was going to be forgotten from the Jewish people, he allowed you to write the oral Torah. That's why we're allowed to have a Gemara written. Or else, if we would not be any concern of forgetting Torah, the oral law was supposed to be so interpersonal, whatever the right expression is, that it's supposed to be peh el peh. You would, if you want to learn Mishnah, you would not be allowed to have a written text to read from. You would have to put it to your memory. Torah would have to be so much part of you that you wouldn't be able to study only by heart. So you could just imagine how much Torah would be in people's heads. A lot of now the people don't have to commit it to memory as much because they could learn by looking at a sefer, but sometimes they're not pushing themselves. Money Rabbi. No, right, because Hashem wanted that the oral law should be oral. It should not, now, it could be the reason for it, what I could suggest an idea. There is a halacha, you're not allowed to teach Torah to a Gentile. Right? You're not allowed to teach Torah to a non-Jew. The law 7 Noach, you could teach them, but the laws. So I wanted to say, this is number one. First of all, Torah is our treasure. So if Torah would only be by heart, that's a way to keep the Torah as hidden. It's not the only way you'll know Torah. Nobody could just open up a text and learn Torah. You would only have to. It'll be only from person to person, and that's an idea perhaps. Another idea is the idea of how much a person Torah would have to be part of him. He has to remember it by heart. Now, so that's a little bit about these, most probably they have in the bottom over here. If you look at note number 14, so they bring this point over here, number 14, that the recording of novel rulings or statements are always considered an exception to the general ban on written Torah because of the possibility of their being forgotten. So some want to say that because of these type of rulings, which they were rulings of an individual that were novel, that people were not well known, if you wouldn't write it down, people would forget it. So that was not part of the original ban. That's how some want to say it. Okay. So now the Gemara continues. And what did they find over there? The Rama Rav, Masati Megillah Sedorim. I found in Megillah Sedorim, Bei Rav Chia, in the Beit Midrash of Rav Chia, the Katuv Ba, it said the following. Isi ben Yehuda Isi ben Yehuda says, Avod Melachot. and Av Malacha Arba'im Chosha Achat. There were, he says, there are 39 Av Malachot. We all know there are 39 chief categories of Avot, Malachot, uh, main malachot, main acts of work that are forbidden on Shabbat, meaning writing is one of the 39 malachot, and harvesting, plowing, and carrying. These are some of the 39. There's the Av, there's the father, and then there's the Tolda, there's the child. There are different subcategories besides the categories. That 39 Av Malachot are the 39 acts of work that were performed in the Mishkan, in the building of the Mishkan, and the use of them in the Mishkan. And those 39, there are 39 Malachot. And it says in the name, Isa ben Yehuda says that the Avot Malachot, 39, but ve'ena chayav ela achat. So the Gemara is thinking, what does it mean you only obligated one korban chatat, one sin offering? And let's say the guy violated all 39 malachot of Shabbat. He planted, he plowed, he harvested, he wrote, he wove, did all the 39 things, and nobody told him between this act of violation of Shabbat and the next act, nobody notified him that he violated the Shabbat, that he violated the laws of Shabbat. So since he did not know about it, nobody told him between. So that's called one halama, with one forgetting. He didn't know. I didn't know anything about Shabbat, and therefore he forgot today was Shabbat. Let's say he forgot today was Shabbat, and he did all those sins. So the thought was that he's saying that you only chayav. How many sin offerings do you have to bring? Right? If a person did 39, violated the 39 acts of Shabbat, but since he was not told between each act that he did that he violated the Shabbat, the Gemara is thinking he brings one korban, one sin offering for all 39 acts of violation. Now, if a person went ahead and let's say eats chelev, let's say a person eats the fat that he's not supposed to eat, the Torah forbids him to eat, and he eats it 10 o'clock in the morning on Shabbat, and he eats it at 11 o'clock, not on Shabbat. He eats it any time of the day, anytime. He eats it, it's not nothing to do with Shabbat, the fat, right? He eats the fat 10 o'clock this morning, and then he eats it again at 11. Every hour on the hour, he eats another kazayit of fat. If he was not told between the first kazayit and the second kazayit that, by the way, you ate something that was not kosher, that was fat, that was chiled, he brings one korban chatat, one sin offering for all the, until he's told that he did the sin. He brings one. If he's told at 10 o'clock in the morning that he ate fat at 9, he was notified at 10, and then he forgot again at 11. Then he brings another korban for that subsequent eating of the chaylev. But if he was not told in between, then he brings one korban hatat. Good morning, Emmanuel. Now, if a person violated many different sins in one forgetting, let's say he ate chaylev, he ate not kosher fat, and then he ate blood. Right? The Torah has karet for eating animal blood. Person went ahead and he ate animal blood, and then only afterwards he found out right away. You know what? You're not allowed to eat blood. Rabbi, I didn't know. You're not allowed to eat this fat. Rabbi, I didn't know. He had, what is over there, he has to bring a separate korban, a separate offering for eating the fat and eating the blood. The two different, one category is called eating not kosher fat. One category is eating not kosher blood, eating blood. So now how do you look at, so those are totally two different subject matters. One is and they're coming from two different prohibitions of the Torah. Don't eat fat Don't eat the fat of the certain fats of the animal. Certain fats are kosher, as we know, and certain fats are not. Don't eat blood. But what about in Shabbat itself, where there's one prohibition? Don't desecrate the Shabbat. And we said if he goes ahead and he does all 39 melachot of Shabbat, all 39 acts of work, different acts of work, not the same, right? If you had done the same act multiple times, he wrote at 10 o'clock in the morning on Shabbat morning, and he wrote at 11 o'clock on Shabbat morning, and then he was only then told that he's not allowed to write on Shabbat. That the Gemara had obviously only bring one korban was one forgetting. But over here, when he did multiple different categories of acts of malacha on Shabbat, he wrote on Shabbat, he harvested on Shabbat, he planted on Shabbat. So then, do we say it's like it's all coming from the prohibition? Don't do work on Shabbat. So he should only bring one korban if he was not told about it until after he did those three acts. That's what the Gemara is thinking, because since it comes from one prohibition, don't do work on Shabbat. So therefore, if you forgot that it was Shabbat and you did multiple acts of violation of Shabbat, so then of writing and plowing and planting, you should only be chayav, obligated one korban sin offering. It looks like you did one sin multiple times. One sin, namely the violation of Shabbat. So it's like eating blood many times until you found out that you're not allowed to eat blood. We only have to bring one offering. That's what the Gemara was thinking. And Isi ben Yehuda said, that's what the Gemara thought, that Isi ben Yehuda says, you have one sin offering. Now, the Gemara says, Eini, is that so? Is that true, that if a person violates the Shabbat, does multiple acts of work on Shabbat, different types of work on Shabbat, different types of malachot, different types of categories of the 39 malachot. He wrote, he built a building on the Shabbat, and he plowed. He's only obligated one sin offering because he violated the prohibition of violating Shabbat. But now we have a Mishnah. The Mishnah says, Avot melachot arba'im chosa achat. The Mishnah says there's the chief categories of Shabbat, there are 40 minus 1. The 40 minus 1, if we do the math, is 39. And when we learned the Mishnah, we asked the question, Minyana lamali, why does the Mishnah have to tell me how many malachot, how many chief categories, main categories of work on Shabbat? We know if you count, all 39 are mentioned in the Mishnah. If I give a listing, if I say in the listing, these are avot malachot, and I tell you A, B, C, D, and E, you know the West 4th station is A, B, C, D, F, and you know that. But if I tell you that, if I list all of those categories, I don't have to do the counting for you. Anybody on their own can count. How many are there in the listing? 39. What if I'm listing all the 39, I'm spelling them out, I don't need to do the counting for you. So the question was, why does the Mishnah need to count them all up? Rabbi Yochanan said, if you did all 39 malachot, and you were not told between one violation of Shabbat to the other violation of Shabbat that you did anything wrong, you were not told anything between, just a cop pulls somebody over, and he said, I'm giving you multiple tickets. You sped, you went through the light, right? He gives you many tickets at one shot. I didn't know I sped, I didn't know I went through the light. I only found out that I did all these violations afterwards. So he went ahead and Rabbi Yochanan said that even if you were not told that you did all these that you did any violation until the end, until after You did all 39. Then you were finally told, by the way, look, you did all these 39 violations of Shabbat. Chayav al kol achad v'achad. You have to bring a sin offering on each violation of the Shabbat. Just like the cop gives you a ticket, you're gonna have to go ahead and what? Pay for the ticket. You're gonna get points for going through the red light, get points for speeding. So, and they're all related to car violations. So too, the Shabbat, even though they're all related to one subject of Shabbat, but you're going to have to go ahead and bring a separate korban, a separate offering for each and every violation of the Shabbat, even though you weren't notified anything until the end. It's a good point. Nathan is saying that most probably nothing is by chance. No, we know if a person violates when the Torah says don't do something, and it has an action to it, it's an action-packed thing, not something that's like by speech. If the Torah says don't speak negative, you speak negative, you don't get lashes for that. It's sin. But if a person goes ahead and he says don't eat pork, a person eats pork, he gets lashes. And how many lashes does a person get? 39. And Shabbat also has 39 mulachot. So he says, what's the connection? What's the parallel? What's the idea? Why is it the 39 here when it comes to lashes and 39 avot malachot, 39? So maybe the point, perhaps, if I could suggest, is that when you think maybe the Torah, there's 39 malachot, the person needs to realize that when you think of 39, what do you think of? You think of lashes. You think of getting hit. You think of punishment. So maybe that's the idea, that a person should really, Hashem, when he made it 39 malachot, 39 acts that would carry punishment on Shabbat. When you think about the malachot of Shabbat, and you know how many malachot, everyone will tell you there's 39 malachot, what should come up in your mind right away on the screen is 39 lashes. Is the idea of there are lashes, that there are punishment. There's something called punishment for the violation of Shabbat. And maybe by recognizing the concept of punishment for the violation of Shabbat, maybe that would help deter the person from sinning. Even though lashes is not the punishment for the violation of Shabbat. Because Shabbat has a much higher level punishment. But nevertheless, even though lashes is not the punishment of Shabbat, but we know lashes represent punishment. So maybe that could be an idea to think about. It's definitely something to think more about. So the Gemara said that we learned in the Mishnah that even though all 39 acts of work that was done on Shabbat were all violation of one prohibition, don't do work on Shabbat, nevertheless, chayav al kol achat v'achat. You have to go ahead and bring a separate offering, a separate korban for each and every violation. Again, if there are different violations of the Shabbat. You rode on Shabbat, you plowed on Shabbat, and a person is able to bring so many korbanot. If a person, right, exactly, right. If a person knows that today is Shabbat, but he did not know, he forgot, did not know that he can't do this act, that act, and that act. He has to bring a separate korban. I know today is Shabbat on each and every act. Now, so therefore the Gemara says, so that can't be what we found by Isi ben Yehuda. So how does it, in the Megillat Sidorim, it says that you only obligated one korban. And here it says that you'll be obligated 39 korbanot, one yasaf, 39 offerings if you forgot in between. if he didn't know in between that I couldn't do this act, I couldn't do that act, and he did all those acts of Shabbat, he has to bring 39 korbanot. Ela Ema, the Gemara says, Ve'ena chayav al achad mehem. Isi ben Yehuda said, he did not say you are chayav only one sin offering for violation of all 39 acts of Shabbat. Rather, he says there is one of the 39 that won't be skila. There's one of them that does not carry the punishment of death penalty, and he does not explain which one. And that's what Isa ben Yehuda says. Ela ema eina chayav al achat mehen. Meaning to say, Isa ben Yehuda agrees to the law of the Mishnah. The law of the Mishnah that a person would be obligated to korban chatat, the sin offering, if he forgot, if he didn't know, I couldn't do this on Shabbat and that on Shabbat, and he did all 39 malachot on Shabbat, he has to bring 39 sin offerings. But Isa ben Yehuda is only coming to teach me that this one of the 39 does not get the death penalty. That's what he comes to tell us. And now that that's the case, so when the Breita says that the violation of Shabbat, if you carry on Shabbat, there is the death penalty. Why is the Breita need to tell me that? We know the violation of Shabbat carried the death penalty. He's coming to tell us this is not the one of the 39 that does not get the death penalty. Meaning, Isa ben Yehuda says there's one of the 39. It might be writing on Shabbat. It might be plowing on Shabbat. According to his opinion, there's one of the 39 malachot of Shabbat does not get the death penalty. But he did not tell us which one. And the Breita is telling you, I want you to know, carrying is not the one that's the exception to the rule. Carrying is part of the regular rule that carries with it the death penalty. The Kamash Malan, the competition is ha mehanach the lo misapkon, that the malacha of carrying on Shabbat is not from the ones that you have to that were in debt, that maybe is one of the 39 that does not get the death penalty. And that's what the Breita is coming to tell us. And once we needed to tell us that it carries with it that it carries with the death penalty, it's not the exception. So therefore, it also tells us what the law is when you do it unintentionally, even though we know that law of the unintentional violation of Shabbat. But once you have to tell me what the law is when you violate it intentionally, so therefore you could tell me what the law is when you violate it unintentionally, even though that's something that we already know from without you telling me. Amamah, the master said, Avoyamu bika, we said, remember we identified places that are considered a Carmelit, places that are considered not public, not private, but in between, right, David? Remember that? We have certain places that are called public, certain places that are called private. You can't carry from public to private, private to public. And there's certain places that are not public, not private. We said that don't fit the description. Yam, the ocean. A bika is, let's say, a lot of valley, a lot of fields. You have a lot of fields together. Vastavinit is let's say the place in front, the plaza, the place in front of the stores, that the benches, that the merchants sit there, and the public does not walk through those benches. They sit over there. That's not considered public property. It's not considered private property. Var Carmelit, and also the Carmelit. The Gemara is going to ask, what do you mean Var Carmelit? That is, these are all Carmelit. Okay. Einan lo kirishuta yachid lo kirishuta rabbim. We say that these items, the ocean, the valley, is not considered public property. It's not common that people walk there, and it's not really private. because people can walk there. It belongs, anybody could go there. It's not private property. It's lo kirishut yachid. It's not considered a rishut yachid. There's no walls around this property. It's not owned by anybody, so it's not private property. This this valley, and it's not, but it's also not normal for the public to go there. So the Gemara says, "Ubika eina lo kirishut yachid v'lo kirishut rabim." Are you telling me that a bika, that a valley, is not kirishut yachid? It's not considered private. It's not considered public. V'hatnan, we learned in the Mishnah, habika, this is the Mishnah Tyro. A bika, this valley, these fields, b'yamot during the summer months, they have a status of Rishut Yachid in the Shabbat. Regarding Shabbat, if a guy in the summer is going to go ahead and carry from public property, he starts off in public property, then he walks into these fields and he puts something down in the field. So the language of the Mishnah seems to indicate, at first glance, that if he puts it down, that he would be chayav on Shabbat, because it says that the field have a status of a private property. It's reshut hayochid with Shabbat. It's private regarding Shabbat, and also we say it's a reshut harabim with the tumah. Regarding tumah, it has a status of public property. Now, what's the story of contamination? We know by the story of a sota. What's the story of a sota? A lady, a married woman, who was warned by her husband, don't be alone with this man. Now, a married woman does not need a warning from a husband to be alone, in order for her not to be alone with the man. She's not allowed to be alone with the man, even if the husband doesn't want her. She can't be alone with another man. But the husband warned her. So the Torah has a whole discussion. If she violates the warning, then the husband has to bring her to the Kohen, to the Beit HaMikdash. There's a whole process of the sota. But because we don't know what happened in that room when they were alone. They were in the room for enough time that they could have sinned. They could have had relations. It already was a sin by being alone. The question is what happened in that room. And we don't know. We're not going to trust what she says. If she says nothing, again, if she says something happened, then okay. But if she says nothing happened in that room, she has to. The whole we have certain psukim we write down. She has to drink it, but until she drinks that water, if nothing happens, so then we say she's innocent. But until she drinks that water, she's forbidden to be with her husband. So now that's called suffik tumah. The suffik if she got contaminated by another man in private, because it was a private room. There's a law. It's suffik tumah in private property. We say is tahar. Sorry, it's tameh. She's forbidden to her husband. But something it's a suffik in public property. We say suffik tumah in public property is what? Tahar. So private is what? If you have a question in private, if something happened in private property or private area, question if something became contaminated, became tameh or not, the Torah, the law is tameh. It's contaminated private property. And so a question in public property is tahar, is pure. We'll see more tomorrow, more details about this. I want to wish everyone a beautiful day. Wish everyone a beautiful prayer. Right. Exactly. We're gonna see what is the field. What is this field? This field considered public, which would be tahar, or it'd be pure. Is the field considered private? It'd be considered. So we'll see more about that tomorrow. Have a great day, Emmanuel and Ralph. Something happened. We are strict. Have a great day, everybody.